Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today exploring another long band name song track band thing. This time looking at the Kilimanjaro Darkjazz Ensemble. They're a group that we've checked out a couple times in the past and are interesting. A little bit hit and miss for me, but always intriguing, always doing something to push the envelope of music in a new way. Today we're going to be looking at the track Lead Squid? Lead Squid? I don't know which pronunciation we should use for that. Off of the Here Be Dragons album. Let's dive into it. See what the Darkjazz Ensembles bring into the table today. So we're in 4/4, but we're alternating accents from downbeats to offbeats, which is typically something we'll see in a phrasing of an odd number of beats. Usually a 7/4, 9/4, stuff like that. The dark part of dark jazz certainly is accurate. This is eerie, it's uncomfortable. Like walking down a dark alley. Heavy reverb on drums. We don't hear that too often. It's pretty slick. Just enough distortion, a little bit of compression on the trumpets there. Almost sounded like guitars. And I don't know if that's vocals or a plunger mute on a trombone. Yeah, I'm starting to think that that's vocals. Still though, heavy use of delay, reverb, very muffled. A very interesting ride they're taking me on. For some reason I was expecting more melodic ideas rather than purely atmospheric. Beautiful use of the trombone. So that's pretty funny over there. The interface element, it couldn't quite tell. Well, I guess it was that the audio was bouncing at a point where the interface was like, okay, there's sound here. Let me put the little the minimal amount of sound here, and then it would duck under that just a little bit, and so it would turn off. And it would just bounce up and down right around this perfect volume level. And so the volume visualizer it was just flashing. I had mentioned the Kilimanjaro Darkjazz they're hit and miss for me. This is an interesting track because it is both hit and miss for me. It's a song that I found some sections to be really great. I have some positive comments, and I think that they crafted a fantastic little adventure here. But there really wasn't enough that would make me want to come back. I'm glad that I've heard other dark jazz stuff, and I think if this was my introduction to them, I would be at the very least intrigued, but it's not necessarily a song that I'm going to want to come back to. So let's start from the top. Positive. Atmosphere. They do a fantastic job with this. At the very beginning, I had mentioned that there was something very ominous, dangerous about it. It kind of felt seedy, like going down a dangerous alley at night, right? Maybe there is no actual danger there. Maybe you walk down this alley all the time. It doesn't take the danger away from it, the shadows that are lurking there, the people that are leaning up against these buildings. Nothing will probably happen, but it still doesn't feel right every time you do it. That's what a majority of the beginning of this track felt like. It is a slow pace, it crawls. It doesn't even really evolve much. It's this slow increase, a layering of tension and anxiety and darkness. But it doesn't really change. It just expands on this singular idea. And I think they do a fantastic job of creating the nuance of this. As I said, it's not just strictly eerie, or it's not even really sinister. It's just ominous. But it's not strictly that. There is a playfulness to it at places. It is a rather nuanced atmosphere, and one that, at least for me, immediately paints a vivid image in my mind. Through that description by itself, I think that they have accomplished whatever goals they have, and I immediately see the value in this song. Aside from that, there's a ton of production tricks that go into this opening, like 4.5 minutes, give or take. We hear a lot of reverb, of this echo, everything, even the drums. How many times can you say that you've listened to a song where the drummer hits the snare once and you get that initial crack, and then an echo of it that's a little quieter, and then an echo that's a little quieter? It just continues to fade out as if playing in, well, an area for the sound to bounce off of repeatedly, like an alley. No, I'm going to drop the alley thing, but you would definitely hear the reverberations of the sounds in an alleyway. Yeah, it's just not something you hear too often. I've personally experimented with it. I think it is phenomenal. It's a very cool thing to do. You just don't hear it that often. This reverb, though, as I mentioned, is on everything. And the fact that it's on the drums is already, you're like, okay, you really mean everything. But it is. It's on the vocals. It's on the trumpet. It's on the guitars. It's on the bass. It obscures everything. It's difficult to, once things start going and stacking up, it's really difficult to figure out what was the initial hit and what's the echo from it. I think that's an interesting element of this track. The more that I listened, the less I could tell what was real, what was the origin point of any specific sound, the one that was actually made, not the one that was digitally replicated. Usually it's pretty clear. The delay is going to be quieter, softer. There's going to be something about it that's the telltale sign of, hey, this certainly came after the initial hit. I don't really get that too often here. There's so much bleed over with ideas. It's difficult to tell what is real. The few things that don't have heavy reverb on them, like the vocals, which have enough to create this rippling effect to them, but not enough to create this delayed, repeated sound, they're so obscured by other things. They're muffled, they're suppressed sonically. At first, I didn't even think it was vocals. I thought it was a trombone with a plunger at the end to get the wah, wah, that sort of leaning into the note. And when you mix that with the ability to slide between pitches, it creates something that honestly sounded like what I was hearing. It wasn't until one of the later times, I think it was actually when a bunch of stuff cut out and it was just that vocal part. And I was like, oh no, those are vocals. They're so twisted and altered and distorted that I couldn't make them out initially. What I found most interesting is the element that I just don't associate with Kilimanjaro Darkjazz. We have brass, we have the rhythm section, we have the vocals. This is all stuff I expect from them because these are jazzy instruments. They are a dark jazz ensemble, and while I don't think I've ever heard them play any traditional jazz, I do expect the acoustic instrumentation with them. This track does something different. A lot of this track is electronic. In fact, I got more of a taste of Massive Attack here than I did Kilimanjaro Darkjazz. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. That's not to say that I think that the electronic elements detracted in any way, but I'm not always sure that they embellished and expanded on what was going on. Maybe in some cases I might even have wished for the electronic elements not to be there, but on the whole, I do think that they added a very specific vibe. The timbre itself, and not even just the timbre, the timbres. Whatever they were using, whether it's a keyboard or it was done in post in the audio workstation, they consistently used new sounds throughout this track in order to create a plethora of timbres to go alongside what the acoustic instrumentation is doing. And I say acoustic instrumentation, there is probably an electric bass in there, which of course is not an acoustic instrument, but you know, the ones that people are physically playing here, the non-electronic stuff. It is consistently evolving and changing, and it adds so much character to what's going on. I mentioned that at least for the first 4 minutes of the song, it embodies a singular vibe, and it does, but this one amorphous part consistently changes. There are some parts where personally I just found it a bit annoying, but other parts where I feel like the sound was odd but perfectly fit in. It's exactly what that section needed. I have no idea how they made it, but it's perfect. And it dawned on me that we're going to call it the keyboard here isn't really ever doing anything musical. Yeah, I mean, technically, if you just take the notes that they're playing and say, oh, that's a lick, you know? It's a little ornamental idea that they're tossing in here. But honestly, a lot of what it did was to craft the atmosphere through the sound. I really don't think that the notes being played mattered anywhere near as much as the sound that was being produced. And this kind of leans into a lot of how I feel about this track up until maybe the last 2 minutes. There isn't melody in here. There's a lot of harmony, there's a lot of texture work and timbre work, and that's it. And again, that's very effective. It sets a very specific mood. It put imagery into my mind. It is effective artistry going on here. But as far as it being a song that I enjoyed, I found myself. Let me back that up a little bit. I think my main issue is not the song itself, but the environment. And this comes up a couple of times in my videos. I think this song works best lights off, nighttime, headphones, beanbag chair, and just releasing yourself to the atmosphere. There really isn't a lot to dig into here. The song sounds eerie, it sounds ominous, there's some layers and some cool textures, and that's kind of it. The harmonic element doesn't really change much. We do have a chord progression, but the entire chord progression is designed to be spooky. It's to have that darkness to it. That really doesn't alter much. The timbres don't really change much aside from the keyboard. The atmosphere is king here. It's the whole purpose of this song is to put you in this mindset. And if you're here for that, perfect. You just melt into it and allow it to take you wherever you go. Me, I'm up here waiting for something to analyze. Okay, this is spooky. Yep, ominous. Okay, the keyboard put something else on. Keyboard changed again. Keyboard changed again, still spooky. And I'm just waiting for the next thing to happen. And it doesn't, because that's not the point. My approach to this track was totally wrong. I can't know that going in on a first time. In fact, even outside of the context of being a reaction channel, it's still really difficult to know that going into anything unless you have a buddy set you up. Hey, man, I love this song or I love this album. You gotta check it out, but like, this is really a brain off thing, right? So I don't want to put that fault anywhere, but I was going in a direction I think that I was going to blame the song for something that it was never setting out to do, and I just want to backtrack on that and take the correct perspective on it. It massively, vastly excels at creating an atmosphere, a mood, a vibe, and it dwells within that. You really have to enjoy that. You have to be ready for it, you have to be in the mood for it, but if you are, I don't think that there's any fault with what it does. It creates a very specific idea and just explores it very well. And of course, all this does take us to the final 2 minutes of the track where melody does begin to seep into it. We began to see counterpoint, melodic layering, expansion of the harmonic ideas, new instruments come in. A lot of that fuzzy, reverbery, lack of clarity is removed to have a little bit more definition of these instrumentations so that the melody doesn't get muddied along the way. And I did enjoy these last 2 minutes a bit more. It was an interesting ending to the track. The last 20 seconds or so, not quite where I expected it to go. It was really rising with all this energy coming from where we just were, which was very chill and lax and atmospheric. It's interesting to build all this energy up with this melody work and then just dissipate it out pretty much immediately to have this fade out, basically. But I did enjoy that part. And I think it was very cool listening to how they combined some of the jazzier melodic writing and the spicier harmonic elements of jazz with this trip hop inspired writing that we have that permeates majority of this track. This is really not a jazz song so much that it's more so it's that it's atmospheric music writing that has some jazzy components in it and is primarily composed of a jazz ensemble. And I think that's a fascinating direction to take this idea. I think it would be a lot easier to create music like this outside of the instrumentation they choose. But the fact that they do it anyways and pull it off with what seems like so much ease is part of the allure, I suppose, of this group. And I need to remember that going forward because I think that this is not the first time I've read, oh, Dark Jazz Ensemble, and then got something that's only, remotely jazzy. And I'm kind of let down a little bit by that. Even at the end of yesterday when we checked out that Sonic the Hedgehog jazz song, yeah, that was wild. Go check that out if you haven't yet. I'll put the card up there for you. You can just click that. At the end of it, I was like, oh, this is International Jazz Day. We got through some jazz tracks today. Oh, and we even have Kilimanjaro Darkjazz tomorrow. Complete coincidence. We're just going to get some more jazz this week. So I just need to remember that even though they're the Dark Jazz Ensemble, it's more that they're a jazz ensemble than that they play jazz music. They just happen to have the instrumentation of a jazz group. But I don't think I ever remember any of the electronic elements. That's not something they typically utilize, right? That seems very foreign for them, but honestly perfect for this track. It adds so much character to the entire opening 4 or 5 minutes of the song that I can't imagine not having it for this track. It's an inspired choice, even if it isn't what they normally utilize. And I suppose that wraps up my thoughts on this. Like I said, I went in with the wrong mindset for it to begin with, but it was still an evocative song regardless. I still ended up experiencing something while listening to it, and I did find some stuff that was a bit more analytically intriguing there at the end as we got that final component of music writing after the foundation and harmony. We reached some melodic ideas, and those were quite interesting. As usual, I finished one of these and I'm just like, yeah, I need to dig into the Dark Jazz Ensemble one of these days. And they are in my spreadsheet. I know they are. They are in the list of things for me to check out. I just haven't gotten around to it. And here we go with another song that tells me I need to. But as I said, those are just my thoughts on Lead Squid by the Kilimanjaro Darkjazz Ensemble. What are your thoughts? Is there anything in here that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you just have your own isolated thoughts about this track, own perspectives or opinions about it. Toss all that stuff into the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps it up for today, but I'll be back tomorrow. We're going to go through another long band name and check out some brand new music. No, I think it's a creator request we got tomorrow. All right, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.